because I serve a God that's greater, and I serve a God that's just as great as your God. But again, I'm concerned about this bill. I'm concerned about the amendment, and I'm also concerned that I'm standing here speaking to a gentleman that racism begins with the issue of slavery here in this country and what that history means, and yet you don't even know what the Middle Passage was here in this country and what it means to African American people, from which our ancestors were brought here on a slave ship, brutally attacked, beaten, raped, maimed at times. But yet you bring this bill and you don't even know the history or don't even care enough about it. That says a lot.
All right. The chair recognizes the lady from Jefferson, Representative Moore. Members, we're still on the committee amendment, speaking on the committee amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentleman, will you yield?
Yes, ma'am.
And I've gone over this amendment, and I think that the worst part, because the first part is you're deleting things, but the overall thing when you're talking about higher ed, and I've heard some of my other colleagues that have come forth, when we leave transition from high school to higher ed, most times that is to broaden our horizon.
Yes, ma'am.
And we learn things and concepts that we might have just touched on, but we didn't go into deep thought about it. And that's the critical aspect of it. That, and when you're talking about what's taught on a higher education level, and you're talking about critical race theory, you can have critical economic theory, you can have critical math theory. But the critical part of it usually comes up when we dissect either an event or some type of situation. And in dissecting it through a critical nature aspect on a college level, what we normally would do is if we're talking about slavery, then the critical aspect of it is why did it happen? What was the impact? How do we make sure it doesn't happen again? That's the critical aspect, not all these things that for some reason I've heard talk about on the TV and what people think critical race theory. From elementary school through college, through graduate school, I've never had an instructor come and teach me anything or present anything to me to tell me to dislike another race or ethnic group because of an event that happened in society. So I looked at that, and then to say that we have to minimize it when it gets to that level of education where we go in depth so that we can understand better about the aspect of the greatest experiment on earth is democracy. And so when we go to college in the various classes that we take, and if you're just an undergrad, you might hit it on one level, but you might go in more detail in a graduate level when you get into that graduate program, and you might delve more. Like, to give you an example, when I did one of my graduate school thesis and what I had to do, I was looking at economic development of small black businesses. So then you look at what problems do they face? How and why are they facing those problems? And what is the impact on society because of the problems that a black business might face? How do we solve it so we don't have that to happen again? So at the end of the day, when we're talking about the critical nature and what type of discipline people on a college level will receive, I think at that point we might as well stay in elementary school. Because once we go to college, we're looking to expand our horizon. We're looking to look at different aspects of society and life from a different perspective so that we could better understand it, with the ultimate goal is that we make this society and the democracy experiment that was began with the start of this country. We have to understand it. We have to understand where our pitfalls were, and truly slavery was a pitfall. And it was something that's always going to be a dark shadow on this country until we decide to, let's talk about it. Let's figure out why it was needed, why a certain group of people were selected to be slaves, but at the same time on the same plantation, you had white indentured servants. So on a college level, I'll probably have to look at the fact, what was the difference between blacks as slaves not being able to buy their freedom versus a white indentured servant that did the same work, but they were able to buy their freedom. So now I have to analyze that critically to see what was the difference. How do we prevent even whites who had to buy their freedom, why did they have to buy it and why could they buy? So that's the critical aspect, and I think that as we deal with the critical race theory, somebody, and the whole process was written by a white person. We didn't start it, but we got to fight to make sure that across America, we understand that that ability to entertain a thought process from a critical nature to dissect it. It's just like in science, we'll dissect a frog so that we can look and compare the internal organs of a frog, and we might compare it with a pig, or we might compare it with an earthworm or a human being. But that's a critical aspect. The dissecting of that animal is a critical aspect, just like the dissecting of events that have happened in the United States. That when you did the Trail of Tears that related to Indians, why did it happen? What was the impact on American society because it happened? How do we make sure it doesn't happen again? That's your critical aspect. And for us to go on our college level, because I'm sure when you were in elementary school or high school, did any of your teachers teach you to hate anybody?
No.
None of mine either. They presented the information as it was, and they were real cautious only to introduce. As we go to high school, we might get a little of it, but then you more into world history and the impact. Then when I get to be an undergraduate person on a college campus, I'll delve a little bit more. But to get to that critical aspect of it where I need to dissect it, whereas in science we start dissection in high school, and in some elementary schools they're starting it earlier. But when I get to that graduate level, then I will look at critical race, and if it's critical race, to look at what happened.
And may I say a word?
Yes.
This does nothing to stop critical race theory or its teachings in post-secondary.
But it's never taught in elementary or high school. So why would somebody believe that lie? No teachers didn't teach you, did they? Your teachers didn't teach you in elementary school?
Not until post-secondary.
Okay, so why are we worried about K-12? That's the break to dissect an issue or an event in American history in elementary school or high school would be cruel and unusual punishment, especially in high school. The hormones are raging. You ain't got time to think about much of nothing. You're just trying to make it through. So why would we continue to spread a lie? And that's what it is. And those of us that believe in the living God's word, we understand that's something that we should shy away from, just spreading untruths to people. In our society, we have people that are strong-minded. You have people that are weak-minded. You have people that are in between. But your weak-minded part of the population, as it has been portrayed, that this is what, now, I think when you're talking about in a post-secondary situation, they're even talking about, I heard one commercial where it talks about they're training their employees to talk hatred. I ain't never been on a job, and I taught freshman science, but I never had anybody to come and tell me that I had, in that process, I needed to teach hatred. That's nothing that we would do. The reason I'm coming forth is because we need to drop this bill. We need to remove it. It hurts people who are weak-minded and believe we who are the lawmakers of the state of Alabama and lawmakers across the country would press and move forward a lie. I met a young man at the pharmacy yesterday. And the one thing he said, you can't believe nothing your legislators say. I don't care what side of the aisle. Then we bring forth this as a lie. Nobody is teaching our children to hate. The divisive concept, nobody's teaching that in classes. Nowhere. So why would you stand here with this bill? I think that we need to just carry this bill over indefinitely. And you know that, and I know that, and you might be pressured to go forward. But you're doing a lot of harm to a lot of students and people in the United States.
And the chair thanks the lady. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Madison, Representative Daniels.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the recognition. Will the
Yes,
gentleman
sir.
yield?
Yes, sir.
So I know we had a lengthy discussion in an education policy meeting that was called to have a discussion about your particular piece of legislation. And at the time, you described, when you were told repeatedly by the state superintendent and others that critical race theory is not being taught in our K-12 system. But then you insisted that,
No, there's a correction.
excuse me?
The superintendent said it was not in the curriculum.
He said it was not taught. I was there, and you was there. So I don't know whether you had your listening ears on or what, but everybody else in the room heard it. So, and I'll continue. So they said that it's not being taught in K through 12. And then you went on to say that, well, activism is being taught through activism. So, and I'm trying to understand where is activism being taught in our system that then causes one race or one group of people to feel bad for things that have happened. And so I'm just trying to understand the purpose of this piece of legislation and why is it, what are we trying to hide? Are we trying to just erase history and things that have happened? For me, as someone that's a former educator, I think that teaching concepts and teaching people about what's happened in the past helps them not repeat the mistakes of the past and acknowledge it and move on. I've never been taught to dislike anyone or hate anyone, and nor have my children not being taught that. And it's not in the curriculum at all, and so therefore I'm held accountable for the curriculum that's in front of me, and my job is to deliver that at the highest level possible. One of the things that I am concerned about with this piece of legislation, in high school I took advanced placement courses, AP courses. I really think that this legislation will have a negative impact and basically, I would say, eliminate AP courses long term. And I'm not saying that, and others have, and as I listen to it and as I look at the legislation over and over again, that this is a very dangerous and a very slippery slope that we're going down. And there's a lot of unintended consequences that I don't think we're thinking about. Now, for me, I'm not sure what's motivating you, but it's certainly concerning to me that you're focusing on all the damn problems we got in this state. You're focusing on this issue. You didn't introduce anything that deals with suspending the gas tax or removing tax off groceries or anything that's promote growth and opportunity in our state. I don't see you dealing with any of that. You've chosen to make your legacy for your children, grandchildren to read about you of being the guy that stood up that tried to erase history in the state of Alabama. and control what's being taught in the state of Alabama. My daughter here, I'm really glad she's here today to be able to witness not the things that have happened in the past, but the things that are happening today that's repeating, where we're repeating our past by trying to carefully craft and control the messaging and what content is shared for people long term. And so these are the type of things that keep me up at night. When folks like you introduce pieces of legislation like this that clearly divide, and that's going to cause a further divide even in this chamber. It's already causing a divide racially. It is. And so I don't think you understand the unintended consequences that you're causing, not just with this legislation, but this legislation being drawn out for so long, for several months, even back in the summertime, where we're talking about something about trying to control content and what's being taught. When is it going to stop? I thought that we're focusing on allowing, not necessarily having government intervene in the lives of other professions or even in education. But this is an example of overreach. This is an example of really impacting the First Amendment. And so I'm not understanding ideology-wise, and I've studied different political ideologies, but this one really concerns me. This session has been about a lot of things that are counter to the ideology that I thought that many of us and others believed in. But we're headed down the wrong road. We're headed backwards. We're headed to the pre-1960s. And I'm not going back there. Okay? And so the things that I've been taught growing up is never to dislike or hate anyone. But the reason I fight so hard for equity and opportunity and fight against systemic racism and things of that nature and policies is because of the things that my grandparents and others have encountered during their lifetime. But I don't hold any race or any group of people responsible for that. I hold those individuals in the merits of those individuals that actually participated in that. I don't hold their family members or folks that I interact right now. But we talk about growth and opportunity, but this is not giving Alabama, this is giving Alabama another black eye. We can provide all the incentives we want. We're not going to get the talent in the state that we need to fill the jobs that we have as long as we continue to introduce senseless, ridiculous pieces of legislation like this. And no, you may not think that this legislation doesn't impact a group of people, but it does. And you may not think that this legislation, in the eyes of many individuals like me and others, that it's a racist piece of legislation. And you may disagree with that. And I think that you really believe in what you're saying. But hell, to me, the racists think it's racist. Because if you look at the content that's being taught in general in our schools, we're not teaching anybody to hate. But this piece of legislation is going to have educators and is going to impact academic freedom. And professors and educators in general are going to be afraid to teach anything. We had a lawsuit being filed because a person felt that because their child was being taught black history, that it was critical race theory. These things are senseless. It's ridiculous. So why are we focusing on things, and I restate this, things that doesn't help us? It doesn't bring us together. It divides us. And this piece of legislation and those that are supportive of this legislation is going to change my interaction with everybody in this chamber. I'm just telling you. Because you can't smile in my face and pat me on the back and support these type of efforts that's erasing history and that's marginalized a certain group of people. No way. I'm not putting up with that. I'm not dealing with that. Because if this is the priority, if this is what you think is going to make Alabama better, then shame on you. And shame on everybody that's supporting this piece of legislation. And so I repeat again, is that you have a decision to make today. But understand that I'm taking notes, And I'm realizing when you talk to me and tell me, oh man, you're a good guy, I like you, you don't. You don't. Because these types of pieces of legislation have a bigger impact on me than you can ever imagine. And how am I now, my daughter, who is in this chamber today, how am I able to explain that to her since the leaders of this state decided to take on an issue that really is about erasing history and controlling what's taught and what's not being taught because a certain group of people feel bad? They shouldn't feel bad. They should use this as an example to move forward better and stronger. So this, as I stated before, this is ridiculous. If this is the number, this is a priority for us, with all the other issues that we have going on. We're looking at the pump, we're looking at a lot of folks that are in poverty, folks that need health care and opportunity. Education is not at the level that we want it to be at. Recruitment is not where it needs to be, whether it's recruiting an educator or an engineer. But when these things happen and you go outside of the state of Alabama, folks look at you crazy as if, and I said, we're not the Alabama that you've read about in the past.
And the gentleman's time.
But we are.
All right, the chair recognizes the gentleman from Clark, Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague, will you yield for a question? The purpose of your bringing this legislation, will you explain that to this body and to those who are listening by way of the internet? Why Alabama needs this legislation?
I could say it in the simplest terms, which would be to keep people from teaching our kids to hate America and each other.
Who teaching kids to hate America? What schools in this state that allow hatred to be taught in the classroom? What schools? You know, what troubling me, sir, is that when I read the preamble to the Constitution, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Has that ever been fulfilled?
Not for some people, obviously.
One nation under God, indivisible, with liberties and justice for all. Has that been fulfilled? Why do we have to have a civil rights law? And we have to have a civil rights law because of racism, discrimination, of disallowing a people of certain race to have equal access. And here we are, have been struggling as a state, trying to build a reputation. You only see us when you go outside the boundaries of the state. People are always saying, man, what's going on in your state? Why are this happening? And I'm asking the question, why do we need this? Who are teaching hatred in the schools? You know, growing up, and I was going to talk about it earlier during Jim Crow. Do you know it was against the law for my ancestors to know how to read? Do you believe that?
Yes.
And you thought that was right?
No.
And the trouble is that when I was a boy, 4 and 5 years old, I couldn't be on the sidewalk when a white person was on the sidewalk because it was the law. It was not right, but it was the law. I questioned my mother, and I asked, why we have to get off the sidewalk? She said, that's the white man's law. We can't be on the sidewalk when they're on the sidewalk. And then as I grew, I saw separate water fountains and colored here and white there. That was not right. So we had to have civil rights laws to make us to a point. And the government had to threaten cutting off federal funds for some of this to happen. It never happened from the heart. See, when things happen from the heart, we don't need these crazy rules. And I'm troubled by this in 21st century, that we have to go back and relive 57 years of progress. It hasn't been but 57 years. That don't seem like, you know, a little longer, a little shorter than my time on this earth. 57 years. Have we made too much progress? But nobody in public education are allowing critical racism to be taught in those schools. And you only get it in post-secondary and law when you're studying law, and that's an elective even then. See, I'm educated. My parents didn't have a sixth grade education between the two of them. But the wisdom of my mother embarked upon me. With a third grade education, she raised 6 children. She taught us how to love. You know, we could go to town and get beat up, but she still taught us how to love. And I love a guy right now as if he was my brother. And we don't agree on everything. You know, Jesus was crucified for loving people. He didn't come through the school of thought that the Jewish establishment thought he should have. And third Sunday next month, we'll be celebrating Resurrection Sunday, and everybody's hunky-dory, love thy neighbor, but you don't love your neighbor. That's what Jesus taught. He taught love. The question was asked one day, which is the greatest commandment? He said, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second is like unto it, to love thy neighbor as you love yourself. Now, when we call ourselves Christians, we can't even love our neighbor. And you definitely can't love your enemy. So we want to, because we have the opportunity and the numbers to do what we want to do, it's all right. Because we can do it. But I read in the Word that all this stuff going down. Everything we doing right now is not going to last. Because it's not pleasing the master. And I could take you to Egypt with that. There's a king named Pharaoh. Mistreated the children of Israel. Enslaved them 490 years. But one day, a revolution took place. A man by the name of Moses was liberated to tell the king to loose the people he had been holding in bondage. So that story comes to life when I look back over the history of my ancestors here in this nation. We shouldn't have to continue to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge, repeating Bloody Sunday, because men stood there with guns and billy clubs and horses to prevent my people from voting. We should have to relive the 385 days that took place here in this city under the leadership of late Dr. Martin Luther King with the bus boycott. When black people couldn't ride the buses. So you want to relive this. How would you explain this to your grandchildren? See, they're going to love regardless. How do you explain that? Could you take the other 56 minutes and seconds and explain how you explain that to your grandchildren?
If I agreed with anything you just said, I wouldn't offer this bill.
You don't agree with nothing that I said.
No.
Now,
as
see,
it
they didn't
applies to
believe
this
in what
bill, no.
Jesus said and what Jesus did.
No.
That's why they stretched him
As it
high
applies
and hung
to
him on the
this
cross,
bill.
because they didn't believe. See, we must believe that he is God.
I do agree with that.
But if you believe that, then you ought to have a better opportunity to carry this bill over. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Tuscaloosa, Representative England.
Thank you for the recognition. Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
I do want to ask you a question about your amendment, because I think it's rather interesting. So why did you delete those two sections about meritocracy and the other section? I can't remember.
There's an argument about subjectivity.
An argument about subjectivity. Isn't this whole bill subjective?
We've done our best to not make it subjective.
And that's, honest effort. I mean, sure. But you just told me that divisive concepts could mean different for every single school jurisdiction, for every single school district in the state. How is that
The concepts are pretty well defined, I think.
No, it's not. It's what, because you could tell me right now what a divisive concept is to you, and it wouldn't be a divisive concept to me. And you know one thing about this bill that I think the spirit of it is wrong? You know what really, because for some reason, it's like some people don't believe that discussion and understanding creates love instead of division. Like, just because you refuse to talk about something, or you refuse to let other people talk about it, it doesn't just go away. It just festers. It just gets worse. And it turns into protests. It turns into people feeling like their voices aren't being heard. It turns into people believing that their history is being taken for granted and whitewashed, taken away. And as a state, this legislation seeks to do that. And I think, I don't understand why people don't think discussion creates understanding and understanding creates love versus discussion and understanding creating division. Running from things only makes you tired. It doesn't make you smarter. It doesn't make you better. It doesn't bring people together. It just becomes something that you don't talk about until it blows up and we can't control what happens next. And, the thing is, and what I find striking about this legislation and your presentation of it is that you can't tell anybody in this room right now how it's practically going to be applied, because you don't know how somebody's going to define a divisive concept. You've got things over here that you believe could contribute or create these sorts of conversations, but you don't know that for sure. And I'll give you an example. One of these divisive concepts is telling people that they have to work harder because of their race or sex. That's in the bill, right? Well, right now, do you believe that a woman, for example, makes less than a man for the exact same work?
I've seen it happen.
Okay. That's a fact, right? That's a verifiable fact. Your bill prohibits a teacher from telling a young lady a verifiable fact that she is going to have to work harder to make the same than her male counterpart.
And Ashley, we're removing the meritocracy clause.
That's not the meritocracy clause. It's the clause right before it. If you read the bill, and this is section I, that an individual should be asked to accept, acknowledge, affirm, or assent to a sense of guilt, complicity, or a need to work harder solely on the basis of his or her race or sex.
Gotcha.
So, no, that's actually in the bill, and that's also going to prohibit someone in an institution from telling that child a verifiable fact. And then not only stop them from talking about that verifiable fact, but also prohibit any conversation that results from it. Because again, this bill is designed specifically, it is intended to help shield people from the uncomfortable truths that exist in our country, that exist in our states, and certainly exist in our classrooms. Because if you think that what I just pointed out to you is an exception, it is not. Because again, some of these things are verifiable facts that absolutely need to be discussed with our children, because as they grow up and understand that, yeah, part of my life here in America as a woman is that I'm not going to be paid nearly as much as my male counterparts, so I'm going to have to work harder. That's a fact. But you don't want that fact to be talked about because it may make somebody better or even uncomfortable. But you know what? These same analogies can be drawn up about race, can be drawn up about religion, can be drawn up about many other things. And again, running from those facts, not confronting them, but running from them doesn't make us better. So when Representative Daniels comes up here and expresses that sentiment about how this bill makes him feel, it's the same way I feel. You can't tell me, hey, we like you, pat you on the back. What I get around here a lot is you're articulate, which is just ridiculous on its face. But I get that a lot around here. You can't tell me these things and believe them, but then not want to talk about what created me or how I got here or why I think the way that I think. And, you know, it just really bothers me to know that we're sitting here debating a piece of legislation and passing a law to try to protect the sensibilities of white Americans. Because this is not about anything else but that. And it's sad. It's unfortunate. But again, I'll say it before and I'll say it again. I said CRT stands for can't really teach. Well, it also stands for can't really talk, can't really think, because this bill is designed to prevent that. And you said something earlier about compelled speech. I don't think compelled speech means what you think it does. Because legally, constitutionally, compelled speech is not flunking a student because they don't reflect the theory that they're being taught. Because if you're in a class and you're being taught a particular theory, yeah, the concept here is how do you apply that theory? So the student's goal in that class isn't to say, I don't agree with the theory. Sure, We don't care if you disagree with it or not. We're just teaching you it so you understand it. That's not compelled speech. And also, that is certainly not protected by the First Amendment. But a number of the concepts that you bring up in this list of divisive concepts are certainly going to dwell comfortably in the realm of protected speech. The concepts, the divisive concepts on their face are protected speech. Because it's not obscene, it's not going to incite a riot. No, all these things are going to do is provoke thought. But in Alabama, for whatever reason, we try to run away from things that provoke thought. Because I think once people start kind of recognizing what this agenda is all about, what these things we're trying to stop, and these sort of conversations we are having, we'll realize it ain't got nothing to do with protecting kids or helping them get better educated. It is designed to socially engineer a particular person, and if you can't get along with it, you don't have a place here. And if you can't accept what the history that we want to give you is, then you don't have a place here. You don't belong here. You're not valued like the folks in charge. And creating legislation like this means that the people who make the rules can also manifest their belief system on those same folks. So while you're telling everybody that this is about equality, the bill itself, the spirit of it, creates inequality and division. Thank you.
Chair thanks the gentleman. All right, members, the question before us now is going to be on the adoption of the committee amendment that was explained. If you're in favor of this amendment, your vote will be aye. If you're opposed, your vote is no. Clerk will unlock the machine and the members will vote. Voting on the committee amendment. All the members voted? Clerk will lock the machine, record the vote. There are 72 yeas, 28 nays, 0 abstentions. The committee amendment is adopted. And Representative Oliver, we're back on the bill now.
I'd move for final passage.
All right, we're on final passage. The chair recognizes Dr. Boyd.
Mr. Speaker, do you yield?
Yes, ma'am.
I have an amendment on page 8.
All right, clerk, receive the amendment first.
Amendment to House Bill number 312 by Representative Boyd.
And now we got the amendment on the floor. We're ready for you to give explanation.
On page 8, after line 8, insert a new section 8 to read as follows, and renumber the subsequent sections accordingly. Section 8, new. Nothing in this act shall be construed to prohibit the teaching of topics or historical events in a historically accurate context.
All right. And Mr. Sponsor, you've heard the amendment offered and your response.
I would not accept that amendment at this time. And the reason I would say that is we have another bill in the Senate that we're in discussions on that same amendment.
Wait a minute, hold up, I got it. This amendment was given to me from a person in the Senate saying that the sponsor agreed, would you please sponsor it? Now here's critical thinking. Here's where somebody does not understand communication, just like we're talking about for our students, what should be taught, what should not be taught, when this is really an issue for curriculum people in schools and for the school board. Now, I wouldn't be here with it if I had been told that the sponsor agrees. Something is wrong in somebody's understanding. Now, this is a critical, what did he say? Critical talking, what does it mean? Critical thinking, critical comprehension, critical whatever you want to call it. Now, we shouldn't be able to be subject to this kind of thing.
Could you repeat your amendment while they and help us make sure everybody understands on your amendment what it is? I think it'd be appropriate.
On page 8, after line 8, insert a new section 8 to read as follows, and renumber the subsequent section accordingly. This will be a new section on page, good go. Section 8, nothing in this act shall be construed to prohibit the teaching of topics or historical events in a historically accurate context.
All right, Mr. Boncher.
And my apologies to the lady. That was a discussion that we had about the Senate version, and because of the timeliness that this bill came to the floor, we had not discussed it further, but at this time I'm willing to accept that amendment.
Thank you.
Okay.
Much, sir.
All right, members, the question before us, we have an amendment on the floor offered by Dr. Boyd, and I've got a lot of lights on. Are all these lights to speak on this amendment, or do we want to vote on it? Turn your light off if you don't want to speak on this amendment, so we can.
Oh, sure.
All right, and the lady from Jefferson, Representative Hollis, you want to speak on the amendment?
Sure.
We're on the floor amendment.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Speaker. With the lady yield, Dr.
Yes.
Boyd, I want to thank you for bringing up your amendment. I have one as well, and it's, hopefully we'll get to it because there's so many amendments out there, but I did not want to pass on being able to practice the First Amendment. Because after a while, it don't look like we're going to be able to speak on nothing. Because I'm still trying to understand what is the meaning of divisive concepts, and I know you are too. And I'm still trying to understand what is compelled speech. I don't know, have you ever heard of that, Dr. Boyd?
Yes.
You have compelled speech?
Well, in a sense, because I'm basically a reading specialist at my highest degree, so interpretations are different. That's why this bill, as is too dangerous, because in different concepts. But real deal is the first 3 years of a child's life, and I want them to listen to. Those are the most important years because what we're talking about are formed there, not high school, not college.
And I absolutely agree because I remember when I was in school, we did learn on who were the presidents, of the United States, and I would call minor history stuff. We didn't learn history until we got to college, and it was our choice to pick the classes that we wanted to pick. But this bill also made me wonder, what is the agenda and what is being hidden? What are you trying to hide? And as far as what you don't want people to know, I'm a history person myself, and it's just for me, myself, and for the things that I want to know. And I can start off with George Washington. We learned that he is the first president, but you never go into detail about George Washington. George Washington was a very wealthy man, And later on, he married Martha, who was also wealthy, but she was a widow also. And George Washington inherited 11 slaves as a boy, and he was only 11 years old. But toward the end of his life, when he died, he still illegally had 317 slaves, illegally, because he really thought he was above the law. But I don't hold anything against George Washington, because that was how he was raised, So I believe you get what I'm saying, Dr. Boyd. And, and there were other presidents that were slave owners. And I'm trying to wonder, is this part of history that's trying to be hid of the details of what went on with each president? Because you had George Washington, you had Thomas Jefferson, you had James Madison, Andrew Jackson, you had Martin Van Buren, you had William Henry Harrison, you had John Taylor, James Polk, you had Zachary Taylor, Andrew Jackson, Ulysses Grant. All were slave owners. Okay, so, but I wasn't taught that in school. But I was taught who were the presidents in school. And I do believe that the issue is that, how you have an ant bed, and when you little and your parents said, do not disturb that ant bed. Because when you disturb that ant bed, what happens?
You stirring up something.
And they coming out. They coming out. And if you're in the way, what's going to happen? You're going to get eaten up, right? And the red ants are the worst ants, right? So when you disturb that ant bed up, then that's when things start to come out, because it's going to be the curiosity there that I want to know, because guess what? They don't want me to know.
Exactly.
And then you're going to have people having their own, my undergraduate degree, I went to a predominantly black university, institute/university, because I wanted to learn different things and to have, I do. Mr. Lee, why you? I mean, you all up on my time, though. That ain't right. I'm talking. And I was on the road. You did. Oh, I do, but then I'm claiming my time. I'm getting down. Okay.
I'll give you a few minutes, Ed. I'll give you a little extra time.
And I took some history courses because I wanted to take those history courses and learn things because I wanted to learn. We learned different stuff. I don't know if you know what this means, but we learned this and all other kind of stuff. But I say to say that we are not taught hatred in school. And most of the time when hatred come up is because you were taught it by your parents. Dr. Boyd, I'm still trying. You still on my time? Dr. Boyd, what you doing?
Give me that blue book off my desk.
What you doing, Dr. Boyd?
I need a book to show those fourth graders. I thought they were gone, so
okay,
please.
I feel sorry for the fourth graders.
No, you don't. No, I don't. I don't.
Because they're not going to be able to get the history that they want to have, Dr. Boyd. And I like, Dr. Boyd, this still my time. It's still my time, Dr. Boyd. And I know you itching. I know you want to talk to those babies, but Dr. Boyd, you are still on my time. Between you and Mr. Ledbetter over there, I ain't even able to get out my point. Now come on back to the mic, Dr. Boyd. Come on back to the mic. Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. I can't even talk about Martha and George. Lord have mercy. And Martha was rich too. Martha was a step up for George. You do know that, right? She held him down and she made him wealthier than what he was in the beginning. But we were not. No, you can't say nothing to me. I love you. And like I was saying, we were not taught hatred when I was in school. And because they keep interrupting me, you need to mash your button, lady, because you're going to be a part of the Black Caucus anyway. Okay, so, and I'm tired of this now. I have the mic. I have the mic. If you want to talk, mash the button that says speak so you can come up here. But anyway, since I'm being interrupted after interruption after interruption, I'm going to come back down here, and Dr. Boyd, I'm going to give you this little minute so you can show this blue book that you've been trying to show, but I wanted also to let you know that I do like your amendment. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Speaker, please. I did not realize the fourth graders were here. Wait just a minute. Long time ago, I started this one, bringing young children in the fourth grade here. Some of my fellow legislators in this house, please give me some respect, said, why are you bringing those fourth graders here? Some people who sat out. I said, why not? Is not Alabama history taught at the fourth grade level? All right, may not be anymore, but it was a good thing. I looked around, in years to come, more fourth graders were coming. More were coming. Congratulations to you and whoever is sponsoring you. Make sure you get a copy of this book. You can start traditions, and I'm going to hush. A little seed, everything that grows begin with one single seed or step. So don't be discouraged. I'm glad he accepted my amendment, but I was going to preach all day long had he not. Thanks to you for voting, and may God bless us all.
All right, let's vote on the amendment. If you're in favor of this floor amendment offered by Dr. Boyd, your vote will be aye. If you're opposed, your vote is no. Clerk will unlock the machine. The members will vote. Voting on the floor amendment. All the members voted. Clerk will lock the machine, record the vote. There are 95 yeas, 3 nays, 0 abstention, and the floor amendment is adopted.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen of the House, Mr. Speaker, and you.
All right, and we're back on the bill now. And the chair recognizes Leader Ledbetter.
Mr. Speaker, I bring a motion right in the previous question.
All right, clerk, receive the motion.
Motion in writing. Mr. Speaker, I move the previous question.
All right. The resolution's on the floor on the motion, and if we will go ahead and let's vote on the motion in writing. And if you are in favor of this motion, your vote will be aye. If you're opposed, your vote is no. Clerk will unlock the machine. The members will vote. All the members voted. All the members voted. Clerk will lock the machine, record the vote. There's 68 yeas, 29 nays, 3 abstentions, and the motion does prevail. All right, members, we are back now on the previous question, the final passage on House Bill 312, and the chair recognizes Representative Ball from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will tell you, this has been a very troublesome amendment for me, and one of the reasons is because of that pesky old First Amendment. If I would remind my colleagues, in 2019, Representative Matt Friday brought a bill that protected divisive speech. And I voted for it. and I was for it 100%. One of the things, as a matter of fact, everybody was flipped on it in this body because this is a political issue. This is very much a political issue. And I understand people are jacked up over critical race theory, but it's a theory. And the idea of divisive concepts in a free society, people who promote divisive concepts need to be protected. And the measure of your sincerity is whether or not you will protect people with whom you disagree. And the critical race theory, I don't know that much about it, but what I know is, listen, every theory, every idea somebody has some truth in it. But politics is about propagandizing one side or the other. And what has happened in this situation is that this has been so jacked up. There's so much fear over this critical race theory that people are out there demanding that the legislature do something. But the thing is, one of the things about using this power is that we exercise restraint. Just because the Bible says just because something is lawful, it's not expedient. Now, in the Bible, you said preach. In the Bible, it says, in the book of Romans, it says, be ye not conformed, but be transformed. And politics is about conforming. Thought and thinking and dialogue is about transforming. It's transformational. But what happens is we pass these laws, and these laws that we pass are intended to conform behavior. But a lot of the problems that we are facing in our country and in our state, these are spiritual problems. And you can't pass a law that's going to fix these spiritual problems. What we have to do is change our spirit and change our tone. And what I want to do, 1 minute, I got an email just a minute ago from not just a minute ago, this morning, from a professor that I want to read to this body, and then I'll sit down and shut up. It says, Dear Representative Ball, thank you for speaking against the bill last week. Your points about not legislating discussions of race are well taken. Here I would like to make an argument for free speech through the lens of my own area of specialization, Russian and Eastern European history. I grew up during the Cold War. Today I teach Russian and Eastern European history at an institution of higher learning, higher education in Alabama. In the Soviet Union, as you undoubtedly know, educators could not teach their conscience. That history educated were required to teach. The consequences of this action are evident today in the war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, censorship has tightened such that Russia has shut down all media outlets from tightly controlled state channels. The point here is we must protect American free speech. Teachers are not perfect. As new historical material come to light, we can struggle with how to best present the material. It can take time to find the right balance. A statewide conversation, not statewide legislation, is the way to address any perceived problems. Thank you so much for your time. I hope my letter didn't come too late, and I don't think it did. Thank you.
And the chair thanks the gentleman. All right, and the chair recognizes the lady from Mobile, Representative Drummond. Got about 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the gentleman can yield.
Yes, ma'am.
And I don't have very long, so I'm going to be short and sweet. A lot of what I was going to say, Mr. Ball said, because I remember being in the committee when Matt Friday brought that bill. And standing here today, again, I'm not one of these people that get up and just say anything. You said in public hearing, not only about advocacy, but you said something about color blindness. Did you not say that?
I did.
We stand here today with all of these children that are coming to see what their government is doing. And we're not colorblind. People are doing things in Ukraine right now. They're dying for democracy. And we're now trying to take and bind up our minds and our thoughts and our analytical choices. We live in a society where we have choices. We protect those choices. And what we're seeing and what we're doing here today, I don't care if you call it divisive concepts, because I have a whole lot of things in there. What we're doing here today is sending a message that Alabama is going backwards and not forward. And as for me and my household, I'm going to always continue to think, because see, I grow from my history. I walk in my history. I walk in your history. And when I say love thy neighbor, I mean it from my heart. I came here with blinders on because I love everybody. But I'm going to tell you today, I woke up this morning praying to God. I said, God, you've got to convict hearts so that we can walk. We got to have hearts that we can talk. We got to have hearts that we can think. And I don't care how much and how many laws we pass in this body, I can tell you that it will not matter, because you will not change history and you will not change the minds that you're trying to change. Those same little children that we see walking around into the people's house today, they can think, they can love, and they can see beyond race, and more importantly, they can see beyond all of the divisive concepts that you have that are binding your heart. Today, we need to stand up and show our children that we're going to move forward with them, not backwards. But keep on fighting, because the blinders need to come off of Alabama today.
All right. And the chair recognizes the gentleman from Jefferson, Representative Scott. You got a few seconds here. Just come on down. Just come on down. Come on down. Well, that's all right. I'll give you a few seconds for walking down.
Well, first off, this is not a personal issue, or it's not a conflicting issue between people. It really is, as Mr. Ball said, a spiritual issue. If you just give me a second, it says, and this is a Christian's response to the issue that we're dealing with. It says, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? During a time when so many are quick to pass blame and complain about others, Jesus' teachings remind us to first examine our own hearts and our own politics. What better place to start than with the critical race theory?
And be mindful of your time. Now it's gone. Go.
Can I get a point of personal privilege, because it's important for the fight, because I'm from Alabama.
At the end of the session today, we'll recognize that. All right. All right, members, the question before us now is going to be on final passage of House Bill 312 as amended. If you are in favor of this bill, your vote is aye. If you're opposed, your vote is no. Clerk will unlock the machine and the members will vote. All the members voted. Clerk will lock the machine, record the vote. There are 65 yeas, 32 nays, 1 abstention, and House Bill 312 is passed. Okay. All right. Chair thanks the gentleman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
And the clerk will call the next bill on special order.
On page 25 of the calendar, House Bill number 63 by Representative Wood D, relating to elections.
And the chair recognizes the lady from Chambers County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Body, I'd like to present House Bill 63. House Bill 63 says that there is currently no prohibition on pre-filing any field on a voter application or an absentee application. This bill would prohibit any individual, entity, or group other than certain public officials from pre-filing any field on a voter registration application or an absentee application. And with that explanation, Mr. Speaker, I would take questions or ask for the BIR.
All right, I believe that's the question before us, adoption of the BIR. And the chair recognizes the gentleman from Randolph, Representative Fincher. First person speaking on the BIR.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentlelady yield?
Yes, Representative.
I just had a couple of quick questions on House Bill 63. This bill basically just wants, it says that parts cannot be pre-filed, right? You can't fill in ahead of time. You can't have pre-prepared things where basically all you have to do is check a box and you know. Is this aimed at efforts at vote harvesting and that sort of thing? Would you consider that a primary reason for this bill's occurrence?
Yes, Representative. In 2018 and 2020 election cycles, there were third-party organizations that sent out voter registration cards pre-filled to individuals. Sometimes they sent them to the wrong address. They sent them to individuals that could no longer, they weren't here, they were deceased.
Right.
And then that information was sent back in. So we definitely want to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to vote, but we want them to be a voter in our state for it to count.
Right. And voting is a very private thing. Sometimes I'm not sure my wife and I vote the same way on every election. It's a very private thing. It's a thing that you need to make the effort to do yourself. You need to reach out and make a conscious decision to vote and how you want to vote and that sort of thing, and not have somebody predetermine that for you. And so I compliment you on having brought this legislation. I think it's a very good thing to do. I think it's something we need to do. We want everyone to vote, but we want everyone to make up their own mind how they would like to vote on an individual basis, and not having it run through the mill, so to speak, and having something shoved under their nose to sign. And if someone does need help, if someone desires help in for whatever reason in filling out forms and that sort of thing, that is still possible under your legislation, isn't it, Representative?
Yes, sir. It is in the bill. The Secretary of State can help. An individual that works like in a courthouse or an organization that the person has to ask for their help and be there. That's the main goal of this bill.
Right.
That the individual voter has asked for someone to help them and assist them in filling it